I have a dream.
It's one small step for man.
I am the greatest.
You want something, go get it. Period.
Empowerment and reflection. Both of those were cornerstones of that class. So many of them were describing, this almost idealized, impossibly practical, perfect life.
Yeah.
Rather, we should be saying to them, let me support you in unlocking those passions and doing everything you need to do to go out and achieve them. But here was the thing. Students create campus culture. So students have the power to transform campus culture. And that was a huge realization.
What's up, my fellow dreamers, doers, achievers? This is episode number 19 of the Dream Big & Co. podcast. And before we roll into this episode, one housekeeping note for you all is we are continuing to recruit and have on more and more guests for the episodes for this podcast. So if there is someone you would like to have on, someone you really care about, you want to learn from, hear about their story, please email us at dreambigandco@gmail.com or message us on social media. We'll be more than happy to assist in doing that and getting the person of your dreams on here. But for today's episode, we got the privilege of sitting down with Jared Fenton of Reflect. And before we talk about Jared and the great organization he founded, the quote for today's episode is, "I am not in competition with anyone but myself. My goal is to improve myself continuously." Bill Gates. And as for Jared and Reflect, the nonprofit organization he founded 4 years ago, I want to highlight that, and there's no particular sponsor for this episode, but rather reflecting on Reflect and proceeding to talk about Jared and rolling into today's episode. So, as for Reflect, like I said, it's an organization started 4 years ago by our interviewee, Jared Fenton. In that 4-year time frame, they have grown immensely and continuously expand on their vision, where they envision a world in which college students are proud to be who they truly are, a world in which they live authentically, forge real connections, and genuinely support each other. They continue to be a place where students can go to feel safe and unshackle themselves from any mental barriers. Reflect has 5 chapters as of now, including UPenn, supporting partners such as Amazon Smile, Born This Way Foundation, PayPal Giving Fund, the Sophie Fund, and many more. They've also been featured in the Stuff You Should Know podcast, Channel Kindness, New York Times, CBS Television, and the Daily Pennsylvania. And as you will see within the episode, we go into the origin story of Jared's giving roots, his altruism, and how he continues to be the ripple effect that he truly wants to be. And he has built Reflect with the team he has now to really impact the masses and help college students be themselves and be better people. So as you will see, Jared has a great story, and I'm sure you will learn something and take away something to implement into your life after this episode. So as we proceed, this is episode number 19 with Jared Fenton. So I'm really curious with everything you're doing, and I must start off and say thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. After the new year, getting you on here is one of my main goals, so I appreciate you doing this.
Well, I appreciate you having me. Thanks for coming out just shortly after January 1st.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to start with was just admiring you for what you're doing, and the listeners will get to know what you're up to, but just the presence of being here, I can feel like the sincere aura and the big heart you have, and I'm sure that's translated into establishing everything with Reflect and all your partnerships and all you're doing. So in getting right into it, was those core values, they came from your parents, or were there any other like idols growing up that like really influenced you to, cause you to go on to, build this thing?
I appreciate the question, and of course everything you said. So when you say core values, are you talking about the core values for the organization, or just my core values?
Just your core at first. Yeah, there's two different paths we'll take and we'll get into, but first I want to start with yourself and your path, and then get into Reflect and mental health in general.
All right.
Yeah, so just yourself.
So, I've been very fortunate insofar as I have had a tremendous number of mentors throughout my life, and people willing to take the time and use their own resources to support me in doing what I'm doing. But my earliest memory of a community servant mindset and developing that comes from my mother. So my mom actually started her own nonprofit called the Starfish Project for Children. Okay. She's been doing it for years, and she has really been my example and my model when it comes to doing all you can to serve your community in the most effective way possible, given your resources and everything else. And so this specific instance that I was talking about was, and this is my mom telling the story back to me a couple of years later, because I was only 3 years old at the time, but we do the Race for the Cure every year.
Okay.
And so I'm from Philadelphia. We go right down to the art museum where it starts. And the first year that my mom had taken me was when I was 3. And apparently we did the kids walk or whatever it was. And I said to my mom at the end, I said, hey Mom, why are we doing this? And she looked at me and she said, because community service is like brushing your teeth. And I said, what? And she said, it's not special. It's just something you do every day because that's what humans do. And although I don't remember her specifically saying that to me in that instance, I very much remember, her point that community service is like brushing your teeth. It's just something you do because that's what humans do, and you do it every day. And so, that line, that teaching from my mom has really, kind of crafted the path that I've chosen to take, all the way up through, the reason that I came to Penn. And maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. But in short, I came here because there was a very unique program that they offered, which I couldn't find anywhere else in the country, which literally enabled me to integrate community service into my everyday academic studies. And so my mom has been a huge influence in that.
I was as you were explaining that, I was literally going to mention that quote. So thank you for bringing it up. Stole the words out of my tongue completely. But moving right along, when you got to Penn, I know it was sort of like, just to expand people's awareness, you sort of saw the problem, and just like any like entrepreneur, business person, they see a problem, create a solution, but you saw the problem, you tried to address it by sitting with kids at lunch, talking to them, but you still saw this void within kids. So would you want to talk about the spark that was created with, maybe Madison and her passing, and then any other kids or your close friend that was on the verge, and just go through explaining that for the people, just so they understand what's going on, and where that inspiration came from to build this amazing organization.
Yeah, sure. And again, I appreciate all the background research and all of that. It's very kind. So I have, like we were just talking about, I've always been very interested in community service, but I've also been very interested in health. And so we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, but when I was in high school, for example, I was very into physical health. And so I actually ended up teaching some of the high school's group fitness classes. And in 10th grade in Pennsylvania, you take health class. And so in health class, we had a little unit on mental wellness. And I thought this is a very interesting part of health, which I hadn't really thought about before. And it seems like there's a lot to be learned in this area. And so I left high school and entered college with this growing interest in mental health, mental wellness. And so as you alluded to, I get to college and I am placed in this situation where I want to meet people. And very fortunately, I feel, at my school, people were extremely open to meeting other people. And so one thing that I did was I would go to our lunchroom every day, my first year of college, and I would eat lunch with a random person, which is probably what you're talking about.
I love that, by the way, because most people, you're seeking that discomfort and causing you to grow as an individual, but also meet other people, which you can go further, but I love that.
Well, no, I appreciate it. And I know we were talking, too, with your interview with Rob, and
exactly.
He really has done that. So on a smaller level, I went and ate lunch with a different person every day. And what was really great was that these students were, my peers, were extremely open, like I said, to eating with me, right? So, I would say, hey, can I join you? And 9 out of 10 times they would say, absolutely. And 1 out of 10 times they'd go, hey, I have an exam in 5 minutes and I really need to study, but I would love to, maybe later this week, great. But 10 out of 10 times they wanted to meet with me, which was great. And so it was when I would sit down with the students that I realized that despite the fact that they were very open to meeting other people, they were not open about who they actually were. It was as if I was speaking to their Instagram profile. Right? And what was particularly notable was that despite the fact that we were overwhelmingly first-year students, right? There were people who, were sophomores, juniors, seniors in the lunchroom, right? But a lot of us were first-year students. And despite the fact that it was, the first week of school or the second week of school, everybody was loving their classes and had the most friends and, had that internship lined up already, but they just have to make one call to sure it up. And so all of these students, or at least, a very notable number of them, were saying to me the exact same things. And I, being a first year student and, kind of going through many of the same processes, at least in terms of our orientation, etc., and having this interest in mental wellness, was aware of the fact that these students really seem to be putting on a mask. They seem to be putting on a face. It seemed like, things were not as perfect as they were describing it. Yet so many of them were describing, this almost idealized, impossibly practical, perfect life. Right? And that was very notable. Due to my interest in health and mental wellness, because I thought, this can't possibly be a good thing. We were talking about my family. I'm very lucky insofar as I come from a family where, their mantra is, you be the best you that you can be. Try your hardest in absolutely everything you do, but as long as you try your hardest, you've done your best. And that's all anybody can ask. And so they're very much, about being open about who you are. And so, and that has served me really well. I'm very grateful for that. And so in seeing this masking among my peers, I started thinking this can't possibly be good. But at the same time, I've been at the school for a week. So, I don't really have evidence that it's bad. And even if I did, it would be pretty irresponsible of me to try to go about changing the school from the inside out, having been there for a week and knowing nothing about the school. And so at that point, I just kind of kept on going as usual, right? Getting lunch with more people, seeing much of the same things. And then as you brought up, halfway through my freshman year, one of my classmates, Maddie Holleran, died by suicide. And shortly after Maddie's death, you see it on my desk, Kate Fagan came out with a book, actually an article at first, called Split Image. And Split Image was all about the difference in how Maddie Holleran was portrayed on her Instagram as opposed to how she was feeling in reality. And then all the way at the end of my freshman year, one of my best friends at school was in acute crisis. And I was the person that found this friend as they were in acute crisis, and they're alive, they're happy, they're well, they're thriving, they went abroad, they are really, really happy. And that is and forever will be the best thing that has ever come out of my work in mental wellness, and I was not even working in mental wellness at the time. But, between Maddie Holleran's death and all of this kind of media about, the mask, right? And about this growing issue of college students' mental wellness. And then the experience with my friend. I had been at the school for about a year at that point. And that was when I said, okay, I guess kind of tying this all together back to the program that I was in, Civic Scholars. I said, and I can jump to Civic Scholars in a minute, I guess, I said, okay, I need to do something about this. And I don't know what that is, but I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to do it. And so that was when, I kind of first decided, all right, I'm going to do my best to address this issue of mental wellness, on college campuses.
Yeah, that's like, you helped your friend and you're a person of service. Obviously, going back to your mom, you're always been a person of service, but now it's reached a point where it's like a mass scale and you really want to help a larger group of people. So I know then eventually with getting into the Civic Scholar, you studied abroad. You were given the opportunity to study abroad. What was it, a grant of some sort? Or you were allowed to research more on the topic? And then if you want to just explain that. And, and how, maybe even touch on how like your travel experience maybe caused like an altering of the perspective and gave you like a different outlook to come back and do more with Reflect, or expand on the idea.
So that's essentially the story. So I'll back up and talk a little bit about Civic Scholars. So Civic Scholars is a program that they offer at Penn, whereby you integrate community service, like I was saying, with your academic studies. So you can major in political science or finance or whatever you want, but you will also have a Civic Scholars curriculum. And part of the Civic Scholars curriculum is that you do years of preparation for and then formal research into a community service topic of your choice. Okay. And that's kind of part of the beauty of Civic Scholars, right? You don't have to be in Wharton or in the college or in nursing to do Civic Scholars, because you can integrate community service everywhere. right? And so we had students from Wharton and the college and nursing and engineering. We had all of them in this program called Civic Scholars. And so at the end of my freshman year, I said, okay, if I am going to be in this program where they will fully resource me to do all of this research into a community service topic of my choice, why don't I do mental wellness, right? And so that's kind of where that connection happened. I then, as you were speaking about, I studied political science and Spanish while I was here, in addition to the Civic Scholars, and I got the opportunity to go abroad at the end of my first year of school. And when I went abroad, I had a very interesting experience, which is what I believe you were speaking about. And the experience was one where one of the first nights that I was there, my host sister had people, was with a group of friends. And we were all together, and the first thing out of my host sister's mouth was, in Spanish, but was, "Hey everyone, how are your visits to therapy this week?" And it was just a hangout.
Yeah.
And it was so different from that which I had experienced, here in the United States.
Yeah.
Because then everybody just started talking openly and honestly about their visits to therapy and their mental wellness. And so that was, kind of a moment where I thought, well, what if we had such open and honest conversations? Yeah. Might we feel different? And so after that experience abroad, I came back to school. And like I said, I was in this program where I had to carry out this research. And so ultimately, I did all of my research on this topic called pen face. And if that would be worth getting into, we can certainly get into it.
Sure.
But, kind of that abroad experience was the next step in my ultimately coming back and, continuing this process of ultimately founding Reflect.
Yeah. The one thing that clicked in my head is like the story of Howard Schultz when he went to Italy and he saw their coffee shops and the way they operated and the environment within them, and then eventually brought it back and created the great thing we all drink, or most of us every morning, and Starbucks. And like everyone has such a great experience in going to the store. So you, in doing the same thing, brought that over in a way and started to establish Reflect. And one thing I want to mention, which is one quote I saw, I think you said it in a speech, when I think after you did your research, you gave the speech where it was, since the 1950s, like, suicide rates amongst college students was it tripled?
That's right.
Or something? So there is such an overwhelming need, not only with college students, but like people in general. And I want to get in eventually to, social media and how that can be a big player in all things. But tracing it back, after doing all your research and being at the point where you are now,
right, what
is that next step in, really creating Reflect and like actually creating the impact that you always wanted?
So, what I had to do, again, both through the research and then, ultimately in founding the organization, was I wanted to figure out a place where Reflect would be impactful, but not duplicative, because I don't really see any value in being duplicative. There are already all these organizations out there doing phenomenal work in the space of mental wellness. We should just be further funding them, right? Giving them more support and allowing them to make the impact that they do in their particular niche. And so, as I was saying, as we were discussing, I did my research on pen face. And It ended up being the first ever mixed methods research on the topic. And so pen face is a term used by Penn students to describe the mask that they wear. So that mask that I was seeing my first year, that's pen face, right? But pen face isn't just at Penn, as you might have read, right? So pen face is at Columbia, and they call it Columbia face. And then across the country at Stanford, they call it duck syndrome, because a duck glides across the water gracefully, but underneath the surface, the duck's legs are paddling furiously, like a student, graceful on the surface, paddling furiously underneath, right? And now let's go down south. At Tulane, they call it the undertow. Because, again, it's something beneath the surface, nobody can see it, but it is literally dragging you down, right? And in some of the most extreme circumstances, potentially, dragging you to your death. And so there were these names for this phenomenon that were popping up from the community, right? These are not clinical terms. Pen face, Columbia face, duck syndrome. Right? But the community was coming up with these names to describe this phenomenon of masking. And what was notable to me was that this was a cultural issue. Columbia face, duck syndrome, the undertow. That's campus culture, right? And we were seeing Columbia face, the undertow. We were seeing them crop up, at universities from community. Well, I guess from colleges all the way from community colleges to state colleges to private institutions, and we were seeing it across the United States and internationally as well. So the University of Essex, somebody from there reached out to me and said, "Hey, we heard about what you're doing with pen face. We have that here in Essex."
Oh, wow.
And so, right. And so there was this debilitative, pervasive cultural phenomenon that was occurring on college campuses. But here was the thing. Students create campus culture. So students have the power to transform campus culture. And that was a huge realization. Because if we can found an organization solely dedicated to empowering students to transform campus culture, then we can hopefully create a big impact and an important impact, and at the same time be in our niche, right? And so that's what we wanted to do, right? We want to make a key impact that, along with all of the other work of all of these different organizations, which are all operating, in their particular niches and making other key impacts, can ultimately help us to address this issue of college students' mental wellness. And so, at this point, having done the research, all of that, I had to go about forming an organization. And so, one side note is, there are kind of interesting stories along the way, which I enjoy telling. I'm not sure if we have the time for them, but there was a specific class at Penn that I was invited to take that was solely about reflection. And the importance of reflection. So, I guess I might as well tell a very condensed version of the story. When I was still in school, it was recommended to me that I take a class taught by Ira Harkavy, who is a groundbreaking professor at the University of Pennsylvania. The impact that Dr. Harkavy has made is unbelievable. And so everyone who is studying service, is studying civic engagement, whatever it is, everyone wants to take this class with Dr. Harvey. And I was fortunate enough to take it. And what was, among much else, what was so impactful for me about the class was, in this class, Dr. Harvey does many things, including during the first part of the class, he teaches you the theory of how to get from A to B. So you're here at point A, and that could be whatever point A is for you. Mm-hmm. And you want to get here to point B, and that could be whatever point B is. And there's a theory that you can apply to make a map of how to get there. And then the second half of the class, Dr. Harkavy goes, do it, and P.S. it's worth 90% of your grade. Oh. Right? And so you have to come up with a plan, right? And ultimately the plan is what's graded, right? Mm-hmm. So, it's an amazing class. Mm-hmm. Because what he is doing is he is combining theory with practice. Mm. And so I went and I take this class where I learn theoretically how to be at point A, see a problem, and then get to point B. Yeah. I already have the practice in creating that plan and going about putting it into practice, which was the second half of that course. Mm-hmm. And then as a result of that course, so Dr. Harkavy is director of the Netter Center. And so after taking that course, I received an invitation to take a preceptorial taught by Michael Zuckerman, who is an emeritus professor from Penn. And the preceptorial was solely about the importance of reflection in everyday life. Mm-hmm. And so Dr. Zuckerman is an amazing person and has been an incredible influence mm-hmm. on me. And so I walk into Dr. Zuckerman's course, preceptorial, the first day. And I remember Dr. Zuckerman was in the room and maybe after introductions, but pretty much right at the beginning of the preceptorial, Dr. Zuckerman sat back and said something along the lines of, I really think reflection is worthwhile, and I'm exploring it. We're going to spend the rest of our time in this preceptorial reflecting. We're going to explore what reflection is, how it can be used, maybe different applications of it, and we're going to do it together. Empowerment and reflection. Both of those were cornerstones of that class. Mm-hmm. And so, at the end of that class, I actually ended up discussing with, Dr. Zuckerman this idea for ultimately this organization that I was going to found. Mm-hmm. And a very little known
Dots
fact.
Are connecting now.
Right?
Yeah.
A very little known fact, but one that, I proudly share is, again, the idea for this organization was building and coalescing in my head. And right before the last week of class, I had sent Dr. Zuckerman an email that said something along the lines of, hey, really enjoyed this class. I have this idea. Could I just get coffee with you and discuss? Mm-hmm. And to Dr. Zuckerman's credit and the credit of the school where I went, Dr. Zuckerman said, yes, why don't we discuss it immediately? Discussed it immediately. And then Dr. Zuckerman said, great, why don't you test it? I'll give you the entire last class to test your idea.
Wow.
Right. And that was, technically the first ever Reflect session. Happened in Dr. Zuckerman's class. Yeah. And it had a huge impact on me. Students, without getting into too much specifics, students were taking off the mask. Students were, self-admittedly connecting in ways that they had not connected before. And we were all kind of together as this community that Dr. Zuckerman built, experiencing the benefits of, this type of reflection and what would ultimately become the work that we do at the Reflect organization later down the line. But, I said at the beginning of this recording session, I've had a tremendous number of mentors and so many people that believed in me and, were willing to put their name on the line for something that I was trying to do. And I'm grateful for it every single day. And, Dr. Harvey, Dr. Zuckerman, so many other people, I'm continually grateful.
Yeah, it's just amazing to see, like, the coming together of this whole idea. And it seemed like his, like, master creation, in a way, like, came into application, which is really cool to see. And, like, just while you were speaking, so many fireworks were going off in my head, because I fully realized with the reflection class, like, how much I reflect and how much it actually helps me, because I'm a big person with journaling, and I also record and, like, sort of in a way grade my, like, core values and how I acted throughout the day, so that reflection at the end of the day not only allows me to appreciate what happened, but, like, learn from it and move forward. So
yes.
I'm, like, slowly realizing how much I do reflect and how big of a player it is in my life. So it's cool to connect the dots there. And then one thing I wanted to mention was, now the meetings are established and reflect sessions are happening frequently. What is one of the best experiences you have seen from a student who, like, has truly been impacted by these sessions?
Again, I think I've been very fortunate insofar as, we receive and we see lots and lots of positive comments and, students that have said they've been positively impacted by our program. I think that one example, though, that is kind of different than what a lot of people expect, and I think is extremely important to share, would be this one. So early on in Reflect's founding, we were having these dinners, right? We were established and all of that. And there was a group of students that would always come to our dinners, and they would discuss art. And I don't know if you're familiar with this particular story. Okay, good. So great. So they would always come to our dinners. And like I said, we've kind of a special mechanism by which we run our dinners in order that students are really empowered to take off the mask and share what's on their mind, right? Because the last thing that we want to do is we want to say to you, hey, thanks so much for coming to Reflect. We know that, kind of out there on campus, you feel this tremendous pressure to mask and only talk about these 5 topics. But here at Reflect, you can talk about 8, right? That wouldn't really do it. So we need a mechanism by which we allow people to take off the mask and discuss.
And I do want to cut you off for a sec, sorry, but 2 of the, like, prohibitions you have is I love not checking the phone while during the sessions, and I believe there was one more where it's like they can't repeat things that were previously said. So, or am I?
I'm not sure about the second. Well, I know that the second one I do not believe we have, but the first one about the phones we certainly have.
But I do love how you have these, like, ground rules to make sure students can take off that mask and be more empowered throughout the session. That's really powerful.
Oh, do you mean don't repeat? Oh, you mean don't repeat it outside the session?
Oh, okay.
I thought you meant don't, like, repeat it in session. Yeah.
Well, now. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we totally do have that. So what we say is, I'll put it in slightly different language. What we say is you can totally use phones, just not in the session.
Yeah.
So if you get a phone call, of course, we're respectful of that, right? But just take it outside of the room. And then we also say, like you said, what happens at Reflect stays at Reflect, right? Because we want to create this safe space.
Yeah.
And that's all part of our code. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So we have these people who always come to our dinners and discuss art. And so after one of the dinners, because they kept on coming and kept on discussing art. And I was so thrilled that they were there. So after one of the dinners, I went up to them and I said, hey, thanks so much for always coming. We really appreciate having you. We really appreciate you being part of our movement, right? I just wanted to ask, why do you always talk about art? It's very interesting to me. And what they said to me was the following, and this is a paraphrase, but it was essentially the following. They said, at our school, we feel that it is unbearably pre-professional, to the point where people will say to us, what do you study? We will say, art or fine arts. Right? And they will turn around and say, oh, cool. Are you going to go paint the walls of Wall Street? And we say, no, we're not. Right? We're going to be sculpture artists, right? Or we're going to be whatever it is.
Like preconceived notion.
Right?
Yeah.
But we feel so isolated out there because no one accepts us for the creative, artists that we are, that here at Reflect is the only place where we feel like we can be ourselves, and it's the only place where we have a community. And that was tremendously powerful to me. Because for many reasons, just on the surface, what do we want to do if not forge communities of allyship and authenticity so that people have their one person, right? But beyond that, a lot of people might say, and I've heard people say that Reflect is great because it's a place to talk about your challenges, and it's a place to talk about, and I've heard people use this word, your problems, and that's true. Reflect is absolutely a place where you can come to take off the mask and talk about challenges, talk about things that you, as you may describe as problems, right? And that's really important because people need to do that. And we have, groups that discuss stress and groups that discuss, pressure and balancing academics and extracurriculars. And, we get comments, and maybe you've read some of them, but we see people say, one comment that we got, which has stuck with me, was, thank you for having this. I never knew that others experience the same stress that I do. I don't feel alone anymore. Right? That's so important. Again, especially when you take into account this developmental research regarding the importance of one person and fostering community
the power of
knowledge.
community,
Exactly. But again, getting back to the artists, Reflect is not only a place where you can discuss, challenges like stress. It's also a place to discuss your passions. And that, I think, is key.
Yeah. Because
Columbia Face does not say, you have to be the best you that you can be. Right? Columbia Face, Duck Syndrome, the undertow. Columbia Face says, you have to be this societal standard that, again, based upon the research that we've done, is impractical. You cannot reach it, right? And it's a very specific thing, too, right? It doesn't say whatever you're passionate about, go out and do that, and we'll support you. And so what I think is notable coming from that is two different things. Number one, people aren't only masking challenges like stress, but they're also masking their passions. Yeah. That contributes to isolation as well. And by having these communities where you can talk about your passions and feel supported talking about your passions, that is how we can break down some of that isolation. That is how we can forge these communities of allyship, and that is how we can ultimately, hopefully, transform campus culture. There's another thing too, though, and I'm not sure if you were expecting to go in this direction, but I think it's really important. So
Let's definitely go down that path.
I appreciate you enabling me to go down that path.
No.
I often speak with college administrators because that's, we work with students, but we partner with students and college administrations, and so often at the highest levels, we don't really have to get into it, but we purposefully work with very high-level administrators in order to promote sustainability, ensure buy-in, ensure resources, etc. But often when I am talking with these administrators, what I hear is something like the following. And again, these are kind of administrators at a multitude of different schools in a multitude of different places. I hear, this is really great. We have to support students' wellness. And I also hear, we want our students to change the world. We want innovation to happen on this campus. We want to unlock the next generation of people who are going to impact this world and change it for the better. How does Reflect do that? Yeah. And that's a very high burden, right? And our organization, as you know, is a nonprofit startup. So we haven't been around for 25 years. What I'm about to say is my personal opinion, right? But I think that it's logical. Right now, again, based upon the research that we've done, we know that there are college students out there, and many of them, who are walking around with a mask on, attempting to subscribe to a particular ideal set by society which says you should be this. We know that they are pushing down their passions, again, many of them, all in this attempt to present themselves as this ideal, to wear the mask. I believe, and again, this part is my personal opinion, I believe that to change the world, to get away from whatever society right now says that's what you have to be, that is perfection, no matter how impossible that might be and no matter what that is, right? To get away from that and to change our world for the better, we should not be saying to people, you have to subscribe to this particular ideal set by society as it is right now. Rather, we should be saying to them, Anthony, you have particular passions. Let me support you in unlocking those passions and doing everything you need to do to go out and achieve them. Because you can change the world, right? How do we innovate society? By masking ourselves within society's standards. Yeah. Rather, again, what I believe we should be doing is saying to people, you all have different passions. You all have ways that you personally can go and change the world. Let's unleash that, and let's create a new generation of people who are going out there, passionate about, A, B, C, D, or E, and feeling supported in going and pursuing that in furtherance of a better world. Yeah. That's what I think. And so that's why I think that in addition to the goal of ours to promote empowerment, in furtherance of a transformation of campus culture, in furtherance of supporting students' mental wellness, right? I also believe that by making Reflect a place where you can discuss your passions, where you can feel supported in going outside the norm and pursuing that world-changing idea that Columbia Face wouldn't let you pursue, but because you feel the support of your peers and you have that one person, you go out and do. By creating a campus environment in which people feel supported and following their passions, we can transform campuses into the hotbeds of innovation that they actually want to be. And you have all of this knowledge out there about the importance of collaboration, how collaboration leads to synergy, and if we can combine that with unlocking people's passions and supporting them and going out and changing the world, I think we could really make a lot of that.
That's asking better questions too, because it's not like, what do you want to do, or this is what you should do, but like, why do you want to do it, or like, what is your purpose or passion, and then like you said, supporting them and doing that in full. And I think one thing I'm realizing is you're kind of making a full circle where you were supported when you were growing up and right now, and then now you're creating something where you're supporting other people. So it's, in a way, you're, brushing your teeth, like you said, your community service, which is very powerful stuff. And I fully agree with what you mean. And I think it goes beyond just this, but, education in general can do better of that, and, kind of breaking out of that mold of what all students do and letting them follow their passions and create a better world for themselves. And like, one thing we always say is, if you want to change the world, you got to change yourself. So it's all about improving your inner being, which is what, all the Reflect sessions are about, which is improving your inner being and being able to talk about it with other people, being authentic, and then like being liberated from that. Because like when you embrace it, when you fully recognize it and are aware of it, then you can be free from, those handcuffs that were put on you. So it's all really powerful stuff, golden nuggets for everything. But one thing I thought caught my eye completely, and with everything you do, you have a purposeful intention, and you want to do everything long term and not just create that short term fix, which is, for building any great dream, the secret formula for doing great stuff. So for you, what is one big dream or thing you can identify for making that vaccine, and like your big end goal that you want for maybe yourself or the world or Reflect or whatever it is?
Right. I appreciate the question. I said it earlier, and I'll say it again. Reflect, we believe that we can make a key impact in a key area. And addressing college students' mental health, I believe, requires collaboration among stakeholders across the board, right? Various nonprofits, the institutions themselves, the broader community, right? And I think what I would say at this point is, I will give you my ideal scenario. We are an organization founded to empower students to transform campus culture. Our focus is, not to have 1,000 or 10,000 Reflect chapters. Our focus is for students themselves to transform campus culture, to make it one of allyship, to make it one of self-love, to make it one of authenticity, our core values, right? Yeah. And so I want us to expand our movement. I want us to engage further and further students. One item that you had mentioned is our social media, right? Or social media in general. But what we have tried to do is we know the debilitative effects that social media can have, and we are trying to use our social media for good, specifically our Instagram. And we got a comment just the other day from a student at Pomona College in California. And the comment, I wish I had it in front of me, but it said, again, something along the lines of, whenever I'm stressed, I go onto Reflect's Instagram and I feel better and good about being me, right? And so, thanks to our Instagram, which very notably was a initiative of one of our college interns who came in and said, hey, we should make an Instagram. I'll run it. And I think that this can be hugely impactful. And now this intern having, essentially having been empowered to go about doing that is now a titled project associate with us, who has been working on our Instagram. And that Instagram is now having an impact across the country where we don't even have a chapter right, at Pomona. Mm-hmm. And so what we want to do is we want to expand this movement. We want to expand this movement, again, ideally, to the point where we don't have to exist anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? So the dream for me is for Reflect to not have to exist. Wow. Because if Reflect doesn't exist, then that means that the students themselves, via this movement, have transformed campus culture to one of self-love, allyship, authenticity, a place where students walk onto campus, feel supported in being who they are and doing what they do.
That's a powerful paradox, and to not be able to exist. And I think you're definitely going to reach that point in going upstream and making that impact where everyone can feel the way a student feels within a Reflect session. And like I said in the beginning, not only students, but people in general. And I think you're going to be reaching the masses. It's all about keep chipping along, right? And you're doing just that. And that was a great leeway into ending this, because I'm sure it'll entice people to check your social media.
Oh.
So if you would like to highlight your social media, the tags, and where people can check you out, the website, and see more of in depth what this is all about.
Sure. Yeah. I appreciate that. So you can check us out on Instagram at the Reflect.org, and you can check us out on our website at www.reflecteffect with an E, EFFECT.org.
Awesome. I appreciate you again, man, and all your work you're doing, and full force ahead. We're going to be all with you, and all the best.
Thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate you having us.
What's up, everyone? Before you press the pause button on this episode, like we highlighted at the end, it would mean a lot if you can go over and check out Reflect's social media and their website to learn more about what they're doing. As for this podcast, thank you so much for listening. It truly, truly does mean a lot. And if you really enjoyed this episode, past episodes, what we're building at Dream Big & Co., it would mean a lot if you can integrate yourself more into our community. You can do so in several ways by subscribing to this podcast, subscribing to our YouTube channel at Dream Big & Co., which we started 2 different series, one called Dream Talk and a mini documentary series where we highlight people's lives and them chasing their dreams. And even more so, follow us on social media at Dream Big & Co. That will all be in the show notes for you to go to. And most importantly, we do this for you. So any feedback, anything you want to tell us, good or bad, you can message us on social media or email us, like I said, at dreambigandco@gmail.com. But other than that, have a great one, and we will see you for episode number 20.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.